herd, and we are now joined by one of my absolute favorite people in sports media. I forgot how many championships he won. I think it's 3. Yeah, it was probably 3, 2. Yeah, that's right. 3-time Super Bowl champion. Legitimately funny guy. And I'm telling you, a must-follow on social media, the great Mark Schlereth. Stink! I know times are tough for everyone right now. It is great to see your face. How are you doing, my friend?
Man, I am doing great. How are you, Nick? Always great to catch up with you, buddy.
You as well. And by the way, you can see Stink obviously in more normal times on First Things First with us out in New York and on all the shows out in LA. I just got done talking about Dak and the contract it appears that he is demanding. And you know me well enough to know, Stink, I almost never take the team side in a negotiation. I want players to get paid as much as possible. But I feel like if Dak wants Russell Wilson money, someone's got to sit down with him and tell him, bruh, you ain't Russell Wilson, and you sure as hell ain't Patrick Mahomes. Where do you come out on Dak looking at $108 million and $33 million a year and saying that's not enough?
I look at Dak and saying, I want guys to get paid. I'm 100% with you on that. The thing that would upset me if I was Dak Prescott, there's two things. One, the fact that your contract offers continue to get leaked out to the press because no player or agent leaks those out. That's the team leaking those out, going, look how selfish our quarterback is. You're essentially making your own player look bad to his constituents, which are the fans. And you're basically leaking those things out. If I'm Dak Prescott, listen, I'm not taking a penny less. As a matter of fact, I want to reestablish the market than the guaranteed money that Carson Wentz or Jared Goff got. And the fact that you're going to pay me less guaranteed money, less at signing, I'm not going to accept that. Because why should I? Because you know what? Statistically, I'm better than both of those guys. And so the bottom line, and I'm healthy, and the bottom line to me is it's not my responsibility as your quarterback to manage your cap. These are not hard caps. I know everybody likes to think of them as hard caps, but they're completely manipulated all the time. And the owners and the organizations use those against you as a player to say, hey, man, hey, if you want all the weapons that we want to provide for you, you've got to sign a lesser deal. Oh, did they get, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they got their running back, Elliott, signed, right? I think they got Amari Cooper signed, right?
Yeah.
Did they not get them the weapons?
Yeah.
So, why should all of a sudden it become Dak's responsibility to manage your cap for you? That's not his responsibility. He should, this is something I believe. Like, I believe that you should take care of the guys who have established themselves that you drafted and who have put themselves out there and played and performed well. I think you should take care of those guys because that sends a message to the rest of the football team that you do things right within your organization. So I think that's part of what has to happen. I think the other part of what has to happen for the Dallas Cowboys is that you have to give yourself the best opportunity to win. And for Dak, I think one of the things that has to happen is you feel as a player, it's your responsibility that if the guys in front of you have established new market highs, that you have to establish the next one for the next group of guys that are going to jump you, and they're going to jump you. And I think most guys take that pretty seriously. Like, that's a responsibility that I have to my brethren that are out there playing the position, that are out there playing, is I have to at least trump the guaranteed money of Goff and of Wentz so the next group of guys that comes up over me has an opportunity to jump that as well.
And by the way, kind of holistically, I agree with all your major points about players taking less to help a team contend. We literally just had a new CBA agreed upon, and a CBA negotiation seems complicated, but in reality it is a question about what's the salary cap going to be? What percentage of revenue is going to go to the players that is translated into the salary cap and other things? And no one ever says, you know what? The owners should make the salary cap higher so you can keep more great players on your team. So I agree the onus being put on the players is unfair. I just wonder if you're the Cowboys, if you've got to have something of a walk-away number. If Mahomes signs before Dak And then Dak says, well, that's now the watermark or the watershed amount of money. He's obviously not Patrick Mahomes. And so I wonder what that number is for Dallas. But we don't have to spend more time on the Cowboys. I want to ask you this about a different quarterback, a guy who got paid for being the #1 overall pick, but now all of a sudden there seems to be some questions about will he get paid with that big, giant second contract. Baker Mayfield. What are your thoughts on Baker heading into an oddly perilous year 3 because all his rabbis in the organization are gone?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I mean, here's a guy, and I did a Cleveland game a couple years ago, and interestingly enough, like Baker Mayfield is a football savant. Like he really understands the game, and he's coming into a system now where he doesn't have the guys who drafted him are no longer there, so he doesn't have necessarily that support. But he's coming into a system in which I think there's a couple things that are interesting about it. It's a system in which running the ball is paramount. Your job as a quarterback is to convert on third downs. Like that's your job. But we are going to run the heck out of the football, and you're going to look at a lot of motion and a lot of shifts. And we're going to run the heck out of the ball. And remember, this is the same offense the Niners run. And they had a quarterback that won an NFC championship throwing it 8 times. So from a maturity standpoint, you have to be okay with that. Well, I will tell you, when it comes to Baker Mayfield, his ability, and I talked to his coaches, I talked to his general manager at the time, John Dorsey, his ability to understand, to take a concept in the morning and to walk out to practice and not only know the concept, but know everybody's assignment, know everybody's, where they're supposed to be, what the formation looks like, and the ability to tag every route. So he can go out there and, you can get into, fly to south right clamp, X stick spacing. And he can sit in there and say, okay, X, you're going to run the stick yard at 6 yards. Make sure you you lose a little bit of ground because the F's got to run the flat underneath you. And on the flip side of that, the Y, you want to hook up over the ball, and the Z, you want to run a curl. And, these are the things that you have to know as a quarterback. And then you have to understand the protection, and you have to understand all the different things that come, with that play. And the bottom line is he can do all of those things. It's the emotional maturity aspect of playing quarterback. Like you can't be carrying around this list with you of people that have offended you, and you have got, I just think you have got to grow up as a player. And especially now because you don't have the people, that drafted you that are going to pat you on the head and say, it's going to be okay, Baker. Like, this is something you've got to deal with. And the fact that there are going to be a bunch of games, like to win games in the offense that he's going to be a part of, they would love to limit your throws to 18 to 24 games, somewhere in there. So there's going to be a lot of weekends where you're not going to necessarily, you're going to be efficient, but you're not necessarily going to be the star. And you got to deal with that too in this offense. So there's a lot of things that Baker is going to have to adjust with, and it'll be interesting to see exactly how he does that.
Stink, let's stay on the quarterback topic. You and I think, agree about the future of one of the remaining free agent quarterbacks, but might drastically disagree about the other. Jameis is a backup at this point. Maybe he'll be a starter again, but he's a backup at this point. I think we both agree there. I think Cam is, when healthy, 30 years old and still clearly not only a starter, but an automatic starter, above average at worst NFL quarterback. Where do you land on Jameis and Cam and their NFL futures in this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think when you talk about Jameis, I think clearly he's going to have to go somewhere where he's a backup. And, and if somebody gets injured or if he can beat somebody out at some point, that's going to be his, that's going to be his way back into garnering that starting position. But I'm with you on that. As far as Cam is concerned, I mean, when you look at Cam, in the history of Cam Newton, he's never been deadly accurate. He's never survived on his quarterbacking, his pocket quarterbacking skills. It's always been coupled with his ability to run the football, maybe 10 designed runs a game, all the play action stuff that comes off of those, all the interesting, intricate things that come off of that, and his athleticism. There's only been one run over the course of his career that I can remember. It was about an 8 to 9 game stretch under Norv Turner his first year in 2018, where he was a really efficient passer and really good. Now, is that an outlier or can he be that again? I don't know, but based upon his history, it's an outlier. And then you couple that with the fact that injury history, the shoulder, is the shoulder really the same? Is it good? Is the foot good? Like the body can only take so much at that position. So I think there's a lot of teams out there right now that really are concerned about, hey, listen, he's never been accurate or had great timing in the pocket. He's always relied on his athleticism, and it's marvelous, man. He's a freak of nature. We all know that. But what if he can't be a freak of nature? Is he going to be a competent quarterback at that point? And I think that's the question mark. I always look at a place like if Tua goes to Miami, he would be the perfect scenario in Miami to say, come into Miami, we're going to give you an opportunity to start. We're going to put Tua on the PUP right off the bat or whatever. And, and it's yours. When he comes back, if you're playing well, you're going to continue to play. And maybe it's a one-year fix, a football rehab, kind of like what Nick Foles did in Kansas City. And then maybe you hit the free agent market again. You have an opportunity. But I think Cam and both Jameis, I think they're going to have to both kind of face this reality that you're probably going to be a holding spot for a quarterback in wait, if you will. And that's kind of the reality of where they are right now in their careers. Now, that could change, certainly, but I kind of feel like that's kind of where both of them are.
Stink, last one, and I got less than a minute here. Let's assume the Patriots quarterback situation stays as is. Stidham, Hoyer, Kessler, it's a camp battle. One of them wins it. The New England Patriots, with that quarterback situation, are they still the favorites in the AFC East, in your opinion? Got about a minute.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what Stidham's going to be. He was great last year in the preseason, but again, it's preseason, it's vanilla football. But I believe they have enough belief in their system and what they do in putting guys in the right position. They've done it with Tom Brady, and I feel like they think that they can do it with Stidham or whoever else they decide to make the starter there. So I still look at the division. I think they're a better football team. They're better coached than everybody else in that division. Everybody has got quarterback problems within that division except Buffalo. So I still think they're a front runner in that division.
Mark Schlereth, Stink, you're the best, man. I hope to see you soon when the world gets back to some form of normal. All my best to your wonderful wife and all your great children. Thank you so much, Stink.
You too, brother, man. Always good catching up. Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely. There's our friend Mark Schlereth. And now, the wonderful Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
So the Dolphins were very busy in free agency this year, and many of the players that signed with Miami credited head coach Brian Flores as a major selling point. Byron Jones says he loves that Flores is a young coach with young energy, and he's excited to play in the competitive scenarios that Flores creates for the team. Linebacker Landon Roberts, who was with his new head coach in New England, said Flores was his number one reason for choosing Miami. And Ted Karras and Kyle Van Noy, who are also former Patriots, also signed with the Dolphins and cited their desire to play for Flores. I love this hire for the Dolphins. I love what Brian Flores has done in Miami, and I love what they've done in free agency. I'm very excited about the future of the Dolphins, but I also am firmly in the camp that while all this is trending in the right direction, I have lived most of my adult life experiencing the Dolphins not having the franchise guy. I don't believe that they've had a franchise quarterback since Marino, which sounds just staggering, but it's just the truth. I liked Ryan Tannehill, yep, but I didn't think that he was the guy. And I think they're in a unique position where they have 14 draft picks in this year's draft, which is unbelievable, including 3 in the first round. And if you are giving me the choice of offering whatever ransom that the Cincinnati Bengals would possibly consider for Joe Burrow, who I think is a better choice than Tua simply because of the injuries, which I know everyone says, like, oh, well, I like Tua more as a prospect. Like, for you to ignore the injuries that he has had in college, playing against college players, however freak those accidents may have been, to ignore them, I just think it's crazy. Now, obviously, it's a risk that you should take if you need a franchise quarterback, because who knows what anybody is in the draft. Half the draft is a bust. Half the NFL is undrafted players. So you take that risk. But if you're going to trade up, to me, go for it and get Burrow. I think Burrow fits Miami more. I think his swagger, his attitude, his charisma fits Miami more. I understand the Bengals need a quarterback, but to me, you have 14 draft picks. Give them whatever they want.
Well, as far as fitting Miami, I don't know what LeBron James' popularity is in Miami right now, but I'll tell you this. Joe Burrow sought me out at a party at the Super Bowl and said, LeBron, man, you're the LeBron guy, Nick, and had a whole conversation there. So if that's still a Miami thing, Joe Burrow fits there. As far as your point, Joy, about the moves that the Dolphins have made, I believe all those players picked the Dolphins for Brian Flores, except for Byron Jones, so I think it's because of the insane amount of money the Dolphins were offering him. I think it was the record-breaking money as a corner. I think he would have played on the moon for the amount of money. But I love Flores. People were saying the Dolphins were tanking. They won 5 games, and your Miami Dolphins will always hold a special place in my heart because it is because of them and the Fighting Fitzpatricks, the final drive of the regular season. They stole that bye away from New England. My Kansas City Chiefs slid right in there, and my life's never been the same. So I agree with nearly all your quarterbacking takes, almost all the free agency takes, and I'm rooting for the Dolphins because I feel like we should send Fitzpatrick one of our Super Bowl rings from last year. What else do we got, Joy?
I totally agree. The Dolphins are really the ones responsible for dismantling the Patriots franchise and dynasty.
Yep.
So,
confirmed.
Speaking of your Chiefs, Andy Reid has found a way to prepare for next season while social distancing. He's put together an office in his basement with a monitor, a computer, and an iPad set up on one of his wife's antique tables. He also has an ARC trainer for when he wants to exercise. And he credited his time coaching at Division II school San Francisco State, where, quote, everything wasn't easy with preparing him for this uncertain time. So Andy Reid is locking down and locking in on next season in his basement, which I think is an awesome visual and also is so Andy Reid.
Yes. I also think, Joy, you made a really, really smart and important point earlier in the show when you talked about the edge that teams that have the same coach, quarterback, and coordinators of 2019 going into 2020 versus the teams that have turnover in that spot. Because of we're not going to have a full offseason, and because of all the way the world is changing every day because of this pandemic, the fact that the Chiefs were able to hold on to Eric Bieniemy, even though it's a travesty and didn't get a head coaching job, that Andy's as experienced as anybody, that they're bringing back 10 of their 11 offensive starters, it really positions them, it would position them well in any year, but particularly a year like this one where teams that have a level of familiarity are going to be at an advantage. And I'm trying to find small silver linings in this really horrible situation we find ourselves in. I'm glad for NFL head coaches that get almost no time with their family, that right now they are being forced to work from home. That for, obviously Andy Reid doesn't have young children, but for the coaches that do, and for the, the husband and wives that don't get to see each other for months and months at a time, the ability to maybe potentially reconnect while you're doing all that work from home. So maybe that's just how I feel about being able to spend all this time with my wife and kids, but I think that part is a nice silver lining here, and hopefully Andy's taking advantage of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so little basketball news. I thought this story was really interesting. LaMelo Ball has decided to play in Australia's National Basketball League as he prepared for the upcoming NBA draft. And now he and his manager are working on buying that team he played for, the Illawarra Hawks. I think I said that right. I was not.
Yeah, you nailed it. Nailed it.
Yeah. Well, his manager, Jermaine Jackson, said it's a done deal. The NBL pushed back and said the sale isn't completed yet, but they are working on it. But basically, he just said he loves the fans there. He loves the community, and he heard they were going through some financial issues. So he wanted to buy the team, and he wanted to make sure that there was a basketball program for that community there moving forward. So I thought that was kind of a cool story. Obviously, the Ball family elicits a little bit of divisiveness, I guess is the word. Like I'm a LeVar fan, and you said earlier in the show, LeVar Ball speak it into existence. It's something that I say all the time because he does. He does speak things into existence, and obviously we know what the career that they've had, and LaMelo may be the number 1 overall pick, and is certainly going to be a top draft pick in the NBA this year.
Yeah, so 5 years ago in Vegas, I think it was in Vegas, it was some travel tournament, my son played against LaMelo's team in an elite AAU tournament. And if you'd have told me that kid, now he was playing up, LaMelo's a couple years younger than my son, he was playing up, but if you'd have told me that kid was going to be a top 5 NBA pick, I'd have said no chance. All the credit in the world to LaMelo for, despite all the noise around him, moving to Eastern Europe, or was it Western Europe? I think it was Eastern Europe. Then moving to Australia, having all the noise. And I know you're a LeVar fan. Me not so much, but it's a lot of pressure on a kid. And he was, when all this started, he was the one in the family that was a true child. To still be able to hone his craft, it helped that he's grown about 6 inches since I saw him play. And you're absolutely right, Joy. He's a consensus top 5 pick, might be the number 1 pick, and is going to be the best player in the whole family, I believe. I root for him. He brought none of this on himself. And so I root for him to succeed. And what he's doing in Australia, Joy, I think is really, really outstanding. And so I'm happy for him, and I root for all those boys. LiAngelo had the one little incident. We all did something stupid in college. If I could count how many sunglasses you stole in college, Joy, I mean, come on. I don't hold it against the kids. And so I'm happy that LaMelo's doing this. It'll be exciting to see him in the NBA. That was Joy Taylor with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
So Joy in the news alluded to whether or not the Tua was going to be there at 5 for the Dolphins, if the Dolphins should trade up. Ben Valin of the Boston Globe, and by the way, whenever we mention one of these reports, those reports don't exist without your local newspapers. I would implore any and all of you that you can, in these, especially in these tough times, subscribe to your local newspapers. Pay for the online access, a couple bucks a month, $3-4 a week at most. It's worth it, but I digress. Ben Valin of the Boston Globe writes a column about could the Patriots potentially be trying to move up in the draft to get Tua Tagovailoa. And at first blush, you say, well, that's impossible. They have the 23rd pick. They don't have a second-round pick. You know how much capital you would need to move all the way up to get a quarterback, to go into the top 5, potentially to go to number 3 and trade with Detroit? That unless Matt Patricia, former Patriot coach, and Bob Quinn, the former Patriot front office guy who's the GM in Detroit, unless they're going to cut the Patriots some type of deal like Kevin McHale did Danny Ainge to help the Celtics get Kevin Garnett, how could the Patriots get Tua Tagovailoa? And the reality is the chances are incredibly slim. They would have to trade multiple first-round picks, I believe, plus a couple players, and still have Detroit give them a bit of a discount. But that, to me, is not the most interesting part of this story. The most interesting part of this story is the clear optimism Pats fans would have, and from judging from their reaction to this, the potential of Tua coming there, to the potential when it looked like Cam might go there. Hell, a few weeks ago, before Teddy Bridgewater signed, when it looked like, oh, Teddy Bridgewater could be the next quarterback. And I find it so interesting because of this. All year long, those of us, and I wasn't the only one, but those of us, Shannon dealt with this as well, some of our friends on the other network, Max Kellerman dealt with this, those of us that had the audacity to say, listen, the problem is not the offensive line, the problem is not the wide receivers, the problem is not that Gronk retired, the problem is Tom Brady's 42 years old and he's playing like it. That Tom Brady is simply the greatest of all time, but he's also not good anymore. Those Patriot fans swore up and down the problem was with not the GOAT Tom Brady, but the other GOAT Bill Belichick and his roster construction. didn't have enough weapons. The offensive line stunk. The running backs weren't hitting the holes. All of it. But if you looked at the Patriots offseason, every single starter from last year, right now, slated to be a starter on offense this next year, except for Brady. All the offensive linemen. Their top 3 receivers, Harry, N'Keal Harry, Mohamed Sanu, Julian Edelman, both running backs, those tight ends that were awful. We're told they're all running it back. And yet if they were to get Cam, if they were to somehow trade for Tua, all these Pat fans that swore up and down it was the weapons. It was the weapons. I wonder if now you think the weapons are good enough, because Belichick clearly does. Belichick's 3 offensive acquisitions this offseason. A fullback, Dan Vitale, a wide receiver no one's ever heard of, Damiere Byrd out of Carolina, and Brian Hoyer. Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, one of the greatest personnel people of all time, looked at the Patriots last year, looked at the offense, looked at the playoff game loss, where they had a 1st and goal from the 1, and they ran it, and they ran it, and they ran it, and then kicked a field goal because they never trusted their quarterback. Where in Brady's final 2 possessions of substance with the Patriots in the 4th quarter of that playoff game, they had 4th and 3 and 4th and 4 near midfield, and he punted the ball away. And Belichick looks at that team and says, we won 12 games last year with mediocre quarterback play with that offense. We can win 10, 11 games with below average quarterback play with that offense. So folks that were upset that I was saying Brady wasn't the solution, he was part of the problem, Belichick, by his decision flow this summer, whether they trade for Tua or not, pretty clearly is showing he agrees that Brady wasn't part of the solution. He was actually part of the problem. Real quick, before we go, why I am becoming the sports fan that I've always claimed to hate. I'll explain that as we wrap next on The Herd.